Greetings, everybody. I hope you're doing well. Today is Thursday, December 10th, and this is our fourth middle grades collaborative conversation of the school year. Today, we're going to be talking about curriculum assessment and reporting and all of the adaptations and evolution of that process in regards to the pandemic. We actually have parents on. Not only are we teachers, but we have parents on the call too, and so it's going to be interesting maybe to hear from that perspective if folks are getting reports out, about their students' progress in all the different learning environments that are occurring in this situation. Again, this is the Middle Grades Collaborative. We're hosting the conversations. We also partner with the Tarrant Institute for Innovative Education, and we have some folks from Up for Learning as well. So again, welcome, and we'll let our participants introduce themselves, starting with Maura.
Hi, I'm Maura Wieler. I am the Proficiency-Based Learning and Technology Integration Coach at LaMoille South.
Hi everyone, my name is Kevin Peely-Hunt. I am a 5/8 generalist teacher on Swift House at Williston Central School.
Hi everyone, I'm Meg O'Donnell. I teach 7/8 Humanities at Shelburne Community School.
Hi, I'm Lindsey Halman, she, her pronouns, and I'm the executive director at Up for Learning.
Hi, I'm Dana Cummings. I'm a math specialist at Essex Middle School, and I'm on the middle grades staff.
Hi, I'm Sarah Popowicz, and I am a program director with Up for Learning.
Thanks, everybody. Again, today we're going to sort of focus on curriculum assessment and reporting. But before we do that, I just want maybe a general check-in of how people are doing with their programs. We're now in the fourth month, headed into a holiday break. And if folks maybe could just talk a little bit about how they're doing and what they're seeing, just a quick check-in would be great. And I did forget to mention that I teach language arts and social studies here in Montpelier at Main Street Middle School. But let's hear how everybody's doing. Maura.
I just have to say I'm so in awe of teachers right now who are continually putting in so much time and thought and care for their students who, I think the fatigue is really getting to people both in and outside of school, and just the work that teachers are doing to meet students' needs and take care of each other. I see a lot of teachers working so hard to take care of their learning communities, and so that's really, I'm really struck by that. Sort of as the days are getting shorter, and as things are continually getting a little bit harder, I would say that's where I'm at month 4.
Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah, we're definitely. We felt like we got into a decent groove with our hybrid schedule. We're a little more stressed out right now because our 5/6s are coming back 4 days a week starting Monday. And for us on Swift House, we're the only 5/8 team left. So that means that we had to make a hybrid of our hybrid schedule because we'll still have one group of our 7/8s left over remote while the 4 core teachers are back in the building. So it's just been, a pretty interesting time to wrap our heads around that with reports coming up. And, I was always questioning the timing of bringing the kids back with 2 extra in-person days, but it's above my pay grade. And we're all getting through it. Very lucky we have our teammates to lean on for sure.
Meg?
Yeah, Shelburne had their first case of a student getting diagnosed with COVID. And so that's impacted some of our community. And we're also bringing in 5/6. It doesn't necessarily impact the 7/8, but we're just witnessing this juxtaposition of people being sick and a cohort being fully remote at the same time that we're bringing in other, the rest of the school is up to 4 days a week. And frankly, I'm a little jealous. Like I wish at 7/8 that was just a possibility for us to think about as we're moving forward. And I just wanted to just add, Linz, thanks to your being part of that impact panel that the kids are finishing up their impact projects right now. And holy cow, it's just amazing that a lot of kids chose to do something on mental health and mental health for each other, and just seeing it. It's just been really bolstering to see them passionate about something and wanting to make change. And the topics that they're talking about is it's just been really empowering. So while this background noise is happening, what's happening in school feels good and affirming.
Yeah, no, it's great to hear all that. And yeah, for us at Up for Learning, we're outside of the day to day. So when what we experience is a lot of what Meg you just described, is just young people that are energized to be engaged in a way that has maybe never been offered to them before. And so our program, I mean, we're in the thick of our programming, and it's, I think probably we said this last time, Sarah and I, in the beginning, we were kind of treading cautiously because we knew how much was on everyone's plate with reopening, and didn't want to add this other layer. But now people are really reaching out and they're ready for more opportunities. And we just had a youth advisory council meeting earlier today, and we had 15 youth show up, and they're just, they're doing amazing things, and I'm just inspired daily.
Dana?
So I'm a math specialist, but due to the creation of a remote academy, a long-term sub was poached, and I ended up filling in on very short notice to teach 7th grade for the beginning of school till late October, and then didn't transition back to my regular role. So it's been interesting to see both sides of both focusing on struggling learners and working with classroom. It was a pretty profound experience to be in a hybrid model where the class sizes were less than half of normal. It really meant I felt a lot higher quality, higher frequency ability to circulate and work with students, know where they were, and for the math to do the sequencing and selecting of solutions that I wanted to use. On the flip side, what I saw and what I've heard almost universally is that kids are really struggling with knowing what to do and or being motivated to do things when they're on those remote days, and they get stuck when they're confused, and it's really hard to know who's not motivated versus who's struggling versus whatever.
Bus 11, bus 11, bus 11 is here.
Sorry, the thrills and chills of
5, 7, 6, 1, and 4. You'll hang out front.
being on a call in a school.
5, 7, 6, 1, and 4. Bus 11 is here.
And from the intervention perspective, it's been hard with so little time. However, we do have a cohort of kids that come into the school on their otherwise off days for additional support. And those are also struggling learners who have really had some really positive gains and experiences with that extra, very small, very individualized time.
Thank you, Dana. And I do want to welcome Life LeGeros, who also just joined. And Life, we're just doing a check-in right now. And I'll go, and then Life, if you want to check in, that'd be great. So I guess one thing that's come up, just hearing everybody talk about their situations, I hope that at some point we can just have a big pause, and it's probably going to be in the summer, where we get a chance to reflect on everything that's happened. Now would probably be a good time also to pause and reflect, because what I'm a little bit different is that I've been face to face since the beginning of the school year. And so, and unlike Dana, I have 23 kids in my class, but we have the kids in a pod system, so I'm around them all day. And what that's allowed me to do, I think it came up on this call a month or two ago, I've started building in one-on-one conferencing with kids around their PLPs. And so there's a lot of opportunity for that one-to-one conversation. I've also started working with Sarah, and we're trying to engage youth in some of those empowering practices that we've talked about. But I think this week, I look over and there was a kid just dying of laughter in the classroom. That's a kid had said something to him, and it just really struck me that kind of event, just having two kids laughing together is obviously much more difficult in remote. And I feel like in person, that's just such a huge advantage, is seeing kids interact with each other on a regular basis. But something else that came up also is that this idea of like background noise, what's happening. We also had a staff member test positive, and it's happening, and we're really hunkering down, and we're really trying to build a strong community, like our pod, like we're a community and we're on an expedition. That's kind of what we're thinking about. And this is a huge milestone. If we get to the holidays, safe and healthy and together, that's a big milestone for us. So we're really trying to celebrate that. But somebody also mentioned that it's easy right now because we have this big holiday break that's coming up. Now, not for every kid, but for a lot of kids, it's like something to look forward to. When we come back in January and February and March, when it's that really long, hard pull in the winter, how are we going to be addressing the mental health? How are we going to continue with our community? And how are we going to be supporting all kids? And finally, the one thing I'm really starting to think a lot about is equity in terms of the opportunities for kids in these different situations, and also equity in terms of what kids are experiencing in the classroom, both between programs, like between hybrid programs and online programs, but also even within the classroom. And how do we continue to put that at the forefront of what they're doing so that all kids are having a positive experience? But right now, I would say it's, we're grinding it out, and the holiday in front of us is something that's a really big milestone for us. So we're trying to get our kids there as productive and successful and emotionally healthy as we can. Life, do you want to give us an update and maybe also a brief introduction?
Sure. Life LeGeros, work with the Tarrant Institute for Innovative Education as a professional development coordinator. Good to see everybody. Sorry, I was a bit late. So yeah, I've been thinking about a couple things recently, as you were mentioning, Dawn, like the expedition metaphor, I love that. And I've just been completely blown away and amazed at how Vermont Ed has stepped up in the last few months. We are going to have schools open past Thanksgiving for sure. And it's, even I love middle schoolers, but I was like, this is not going to work. They're not going to be able to like pull off all this social distancing and school stuff. And from everything I've seen, like they've just stepped up. They've done better than people could have imagined. Even in my own family, like our kids are like our inspiration when it comes to this stuff. They're reminding us to bring our masks, and they're just telling us it's not that big of a deal. Just do what you got to do. So that's a beautiful thing, and very inspiring. Tons of resilience. And so one thing I've been thinking about is like this difference between kind of necessary resilience and unnecessary resilience. And like I can totally be inspired by people doing what they need to do to get through this pandemic, but there's other pieces that are something that we could have different systems in place, and we could be making different decisions to relieve some pressure. And I think socially of our society, like we could be providing resources, we could be giving people money so that they are not worrying about homelessness or stressing out so bad about their jobs. And in schools, I think, this assessment and reporting topic is right along those lines. Like, what could we be doing differently around assessment and reporting to take some of the pressure off? And I'm just, the expedition metaphor, like you wouldn't get 1/3 through your expedition and then all of a sudden, like, you got to give everybody grades and evaluate them, even if it's like super harsh, right? Like we're all in this together. So, I think there's quite an interesting thing that happened last spring with assessment reporting, where so many places just said, we're done with scores and grades, like we're going all narrative, we're going to try to be supportive, formative feedback, all those things that I know are near and dear to many of our hearts, and match things like, PLPs, student-led conferences, these other aspects that are in place. And then come this year, I actually wrote a blog post where I went around and asked people like, are the shifts that, the positive shifts in my mind sticking, or are we snapping back to old practice? And it, looking around, pretty much everybody, it seemed, we're going back to giving scores or giving letter grades or those sorts of things. So I'm just wondering how we can, bring that grace into our systems as well, and take pressure off and not ask of our students and educators for that kind of unnecessary resilience, because there's already so much resilience happening that it's awesome, but I think we could relieve pressure in other ways.
Thank you very much for that. That's a good segue into sort of the core of what we're going to talk about today, which is that assessment and reporting. Before we get into that, though, Mr. Rivers, Joe, do you want to introduce yourself and just maybe give us a brief check-in on how things are going?
Joe Rivers at Brattleboro Area Middle School, and I'm fully remote with 100 students and some colleagues, and things are going okay.
Thanks, Joe. It's always good to see you. So one of our
Hey,
questions.
Don.
Yes, go
Sarah
ahead.
didn't have a chance to respond on that
sorry.
last question.
Sorry, Sarah, go ahead.
It's okay, but thank you. Yeah, as everyone was listening, I'm just nodding my head and just feeling, like Lindsey said, we're not in the classroom right now, but we're working with schools and teachers and youth on a daily basis and from all over the state. So we're hearing lots of stories and we're seeing lots of examples, which I feel really fortunate to see, right, to get like this perspective. I used to just really be in a bubble. And so it's really interesting. And I'll echo Lindsey saying that we're seeing a lot of youth who are just like so involved and craving this extra and this, almost like these passion project type pieces. I'm working with CPS teams who are just so excited to be diving into what I feel like they're really hanging on to as some critical learning and what's really exciting them on a day-to-day. So seeing that is really positive. With all of that said, I also understand from the teacher's perspective this time of year. And I was making a joke of it yesterday, actually, the dread of the January 3rd or 2nd or 4th, whatever day you go back after the holiday break. I remember that weighing on my chest so heavily that it would physically make me like anxious. And it happens to also be my mom's birthday. And we joke, it's the worst day of the year. Like nobody loves that day. And so part of what I've really been thinking about and UP has been thinking about is how can we be there to help support teachers and youth and schools to look at January in not that dreaded, oh my God, how are we going to get through January, but providing some hope, some inspiration, some reconnection, some reimagining, some re-envisioning, and little sparks of joy. Just like Don said, seeing students laugh in the classroom, like that is what, I mean, that's what we hope for, we live for as far as working in education, are those pieces. So within all of this craziness, how can we help teachers and youth hold on to those sparks of connection and reinvigoration? And that's what I'm going to be working on along with UP to really make sure that January doesn't feel like that, right? We can start the year off right. So that's sort of where I'm in like two planes, but that's where my head is at right now.
Could I just say one quick thing to piggyback on that, because it could be really useful? Our Youth Advisory Council created a survey that is for youth across the state of Vermont. It's learning during COVID, and they're really trying to capture what's worked, what hasn't worked, what's worked like academically, what's worked social emotionally, a whole bunch of different questions. And actually, Meg, I think Mira's brought it to your school, and your school probably, I know she was in communication with the leadership. And so they're really trying to capture this so that they can pull together a youth forum during our Reimagining Education month of January. So so I can share the link to that survey in the chat, and then if folks are willing to share it, they'd be very grateful.
Yeah, and I would appreciate having that link too, and we can put that out on the social media, which would be awesome. And it's great to see so many people. I apologize for mixing up the order, but I put in the order of speaking in the chat. Hopefully keep me on track. The next kind of question, which is sort of cumulative, and I don't want to forget what Sarah just said. If we have time at the end, maybe we can think about how we are going to motivate our kids through January. And it sounds like Lindsey already has some ideas, and Sarah, but because we've been talking about that as well with our students and with our colleagues. But I'm kind of going to look at the other perspective of it, which is we just finished our reporting period, and we have gone back to progress reports and proficiencies, and I completely understand sort of what was happening with remote learning. And I also want to I had to remind myself that our kids have not had a progress report or some assessment of their ability, like a formal one that they were used to since last March. So we're going on 9 months. And so my question to myself is, how am I assessing kids who may have had extended absences for quarantines, who may be dealing with extenuating circumstances or trauma outside of the classroom, who may have deficits in skills that were brought on by the remote learning, who may have many different needs that I need to accommodate, and what messages is our assessment sending to them and those progress reports, and what are we doing about it? And so I'll just say that in my practice, if kids are absent, I'm just grading or assessing kids on things that they've turned in. I'm being as lenient and constructive and positive as possible. So I'm using a lot of narrative feedback to kids. And I'm also asking kids for a lot of feedback. Do you think this was fair? Do you think you were prepared? Do you have specific comments for me about what we can be doing better? And I think in some ways, some kids are craving that normality in some way, like this is something they're used to. And so that's an aspect of the conversation that I'm pondering or thinking about as a practitioner. But I guess one of the things, and especially remember, I'm face to face, so I can talk to kids every day, which is much different than remote. And I can, address things to the whole group, not just to individuals. And so for me, I think that's awesome. But I think we also really have to remember too, when kids get feedback remotely, how that message is received and how that can cut off engagement so quickly, and how fragile that can be without really strong positive relationships. So that's just where I am, just some quick thoughts on that. But if we could hear folks talk about, what are the expectations for assessment, and how are we reporting? And also in particular, how are we reporting out to families, and how are we bringing families into the conversation? And feel free to take this where you need to. And we'll start with Maura.
Thanks. I think like a lot of schools and districts for our middle level, we used narrative reports at the end of last year. And, we spent a lot of time as a district last spring and over the summer really trying to streamline what it was that we are designing our instruction around and providing feedback on. So really taking a close look at the proficiencies that we have and trying to identify what are the key pieces, those skills that students really, we need to be focusing the most on. And so We are reporting with proficiencies. We finished our first quarter and our first trimester, so all students have received a report. We don't publish a grade until the end of the year. So it's really more if students are on, above, or below target. And so instead of being sort of a summative, it's really, this is where they are in relation to the end of the year goal. And so we've been talking a lot about, how do we, before reports even go out, how do we identify those students that we may need to think about providing extra supports or extension opportunities to really help them, especially since some of the supports that we had, we don't have access to just because of scheduling, or students aren't in the building, or interventionists pulling groups of kids out. And so really trying to think about, what does that look like? I was also thinking about what you were saying about extended absences or things like that. Another piece of our reporting system that we've had before, but we are continuing to utilize, we have this, we sort of ongoing will continue to print reports for students as if they progress. So we, can always utilize, we call it not enough evidence, but, we work with the student and with families and say, we're just going to pause on this for a moment. And when we do have an evidence, or when we do feel like the student has continued to work and strengthen that proficiency, we'll issue a new report. So even though they do come out 3 times a year, we are in a formal reporting sense still doing that. But I think our real conversation is about, how does a student know how they're doing throughout the process of learning? Because the report card really, or the progress report, it really shouldn't be a surprise. These conversations should be ongoing, and it's really more important that they're getting feedback in the process of learning than these sort of letters that get mailed home. And also talking about, how does a parent know how their child is or their student is doing? And so I think we've had a lot of conversations about that, and just really trying to help support that and that communication and relationship, because that's really what is most important in this process.
Thank you very much, Maura. I appreciate that. Kevin?
Yeah, it's on Swift House, again, I can feel like I'm always just a spokesperson for something that the original Swift House teachers created back in 1990, because when they started the team, it was really based in PLPs and standards-based learning, and the reporting was always more of this narrative feedback than it was a grade, and we've stuck to that ever since. So it was really nice when that kind of pendulum came back at us with the proficiencies. We all celebrated last spring. We're like, all right, everybody's doing narratives now, and we don't have every teacher worrying about scores per se. So what I was thinking, is we rely so heavily on those narratives, because it just, it allows us to really give a snapshot of our feedback of how the student's doing, both with their habits of learning, with the content standards, without just relying on the numbers. The thing that's nice, I do think, with some of the summative scores is that is the objective measure, where we always say to our students, hopefully when you see these, you're not surprised, because we've been giving you feedback and having these conversations along the way. So if you get a 2 out of 4 based on our learning scale, hopefully it's, and we always say, that's just communication of where you are on the path right now. It's not an end all be all. It's going to change. But hopefully it's not a surprise to you. It's just, we're communicating, this is what you're able to do independently right now. And that's the message we always, promote when reports are coming out. And honestly, it's just, ever since I've been working on, again, I only know working on Swift House, I haven't had any other experience, but I've never gotten any feedback from parents about scores. Our conferences are really just driven by the PLPs. I think, based on what we write up on our reports, parents get a really good snapshot, even if, maybe they're not happy with a score that their kid gets. Hopefully, it's reflected in the narrative, and, we all do it when we write it up. It's that sandwich comment. Here's what's really going well. Here are some next steps to work on. And here's why we absolutely love having your kid in the class, because when it comes down to it, we just adore all these kids, and they're the reason that we're coming to work every day. I do worry at times with the reporting. Don, I know I just sent you a message about how you thought about how our report works. Now that you get to see it, reporting out on the standards, it can become lengthy really quickly. And thinking about, once you start adding up your 4 core classes plus essential arts plus world language, each of those classes have, however many learning targets. And all of a sudden you get this PDF of 2, 3, 4 pages. And, for somebody that has, an education background, you're like, oh, this is great. This is awesome feedback. I love this. I'm thinking about, what about that family that is looking at this? I'm like, no idea what these numbers are meaning. And especially if they're just getting like a generic comment of, this is what we did in class, like, cool, but how did my kid do? So I'm really hoping, again, back to Life's point, that we're not going to fall too far back into the original, let's just score for the sake of scoring, but let's make sure we're being meaningful about the feedback that we're giving around assessments, and kind of get away from this, grading mentality that our education system has been based on for a little too long. That's my take.
All right, thank you. Meg?
Thank you for that, Kev, because I think I was there in 1990 when I did my student teaching on Swift House. And what a great foundation, right? For sure. I think our jump rope reports are due next week, and I have been kicking and screaming about it. And I think it's because I have been giving feedback all along, and I just hate this like fixed structure of jump rope where it's like red if you got a 1, and a lot of times like it's just makes me really frustrated. And I'm not sure, to be honest, I haven't been paying a lot. I need to pay more attention to like what the district is asking us to do related to that. I'm really hoping that there's ways that we can change the color so that it doesn't scream alarm. But really, what I wanted to focus on was just this, similar to what Maura and Kev said about year-long targets. Is we just hammer that all the time with kids so that they know that these are over the course of the year, and we communicate that with families on a regular basis. Focusing on transferable skills, like one of the things that kids have really had to do, obviously, in this environment is listening. And so we've been talking to them about how do we show evidence of listening? How do we show evidence of self-direction? And those are the kinds of things that we're really trying to like celebrate with kids. Like you just worked through that entire task and you worked for 25 minutes like independently, and look at the evidence that you have of that. So I think just really trying to emphasize those transferable skills. And I think we heard this in our conferences from kids and I think from families, but that by shrinking the field and doing this ridiculous rotation, but I think it's helping kids and families. We're only focusing on, 2 content areas in a 3-week session. And that's really allowed us to it's upended some of the ways that I teach because it's requiring more planning to just be so intentional. Here's the one thing that I'm going to focus on over this course. I'm going to let you practice it and practice it. I'm going to give you feedback. And then when this score comes or this assessment comes, whether it's through Google Classroom or wherever it comes, because we've been talking about just that one area. And I think just the feedback, just that important reminder that the feedback is personal to kids. One of the kids said to me today, your feedback sounds like you're just talking to me like as if we're talking in person. And I was like, well, yeah, because it's a conversation, like it has to be a conversation. It's not, she's like, I'm standing right here. I'm like, I know, but I still need to write it as if you and I are having a conversation. So my hope out of this would be to take away, is there a way that I can communicate back to the district that even some of these slight changes can make a big difference in how families and kids receive? Kev, your point about length and that color coding thing would be 2 easy changes, it seems like, or they seem doable.
All right, thanks, Meg. Lindsey?
Yeah, so my perspective is obviously quite different. I don't have the same perspective as Kevin and Meg and Maura, because it's usually either like the youth that I'm working closely with, hearing from them, and or the bigger landscape perspective. But one thing I would just say, so I don't have a lot to add, but one thing I would say is I've heard very often around the inequities that exist with the proficiency-based system, because one of the beautiful things about Vermont is how community focused we are and local. And at the same time, some school districts assess 10 proficiencies, like that's what you're working towards for graduation, and there's a lot of skills that fall under all those 10, and then some are working under 140. So you have so just thinking about Kevin, like I might have made up that number, but I'm fairly certain when I've heard Pat Fitzsimmons at the AOE speak, it's been in the hundreds. So when you provide a reporting tool, to some families, and you have just that amount of text information, that means probably not much at all, nothing, what are who are we really servicing? I don't know, jump rope, paying them some money, right? I mean, so I would just put it out there, that piece, the bigger landscape, like what are we really assessing? And then I just want to leave you with a really positive quote that I heard yesterday when I was in one of my meetings from one of our youth partners in Montpelier. She said, during this time, she's like, something happened. She just wrote an article for VT Digger, actually. She said, and we were congratulating her, and she's like, I know my PLP is exploding. And I was like, yes, let's harness that. Like our youth, their PLP should be exploding right now. So that's all I have to add to that one.
Thanks, Lindsay. Dana?
Boy, I don't know where to start or end on this. I have a lot of thoughts and feelings. Not all of them should really get out in this sort of a forum. From the very, very early stages of the pandemic, people have highlighted that inequities were going to be magnified. And I really appreciated in the AOE's guidance of continuity of learning that it was really about, because of the abrupt change, that we were trying to keep kids at a maintenance level and recognizing we weren't going to be able to be effective with all students if we continued at a pace to, quote, finish curriculum by the end of the year. And what I saw is, and what I've heard is that really didn't play out, which was sort of understandable. But as we moved through the summer and came into the school year, I feel like some of those pieces are being addressed better. So that example of kids that are coming into the school on what would otherwise be a remote day for services, but it's not open to everybody. And I have heard of teachers, people who are planning to cover a year's curriculum in this school year, even though they see kids 40% of the time. And 60% of the time, they are working more or less independently with independent learning resources. And that's great for a certain cohort. When I was subbing, I took some real heat from a family because I wasn't moving fast enough and doing enough for their kid. And I understand I wasn't doing as much as I need to do to challenge. But for me, I am far, far more concerned about those who don't have the resources, whether it's financial or physical space or the educational background, whatever, to support kids at home. And I think that the idea that we're going to get a year of instruction out of this school year, I think it's absurd, and it really worries me. I think that we're doing curriculum work on scope and sequence, and one of the guidance pieces that we've had is to, well, yeah, this year's different, but just, think about the dates that it would typically be, and we'll put it in place next year. And all I could think is that we've had a third of last year, and it's looking like all of this year to be disrupted, at least in this hybrid model. it feels like what used to be a grade level expectation doesn't have meaning in the next several years because of the amount of scatter that we're going to see because of inequity. Like, I don't really know what to expect when kids come back and we're all full-time. I don't think it's going to be, we go back to teaching the exact same curriculum. So I really wonder about that.
Thank you, Dana. And Sarah, I know you have to pop out, but what's your perspective?
I'll offer a different perspective just because I'm not in the classroom. Again, more from my personal experience of what I'm seeing, and just something I've been interested in for a really long time is the continuity of this conversation throughout a district between elementary, middle, and high school. I'll see you in a minute, Lindsay. And
I'm just gonna go because I can open the Zoom.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
exactly. I'll see you in a minute. And so I'm looking at I have a son in the middle school, and I have a son who's a freshman in the high school. And so very, very different perspectives on what's happening right now with reporting and feedback and assessment, and quite frankly, how both of them are feeling and how connected they feel to their teachers. And I love my school district. I'm not trying to be like, I don't want to be negative. I know everyone's working really hard. But I'm just curious, the conversations that are happening district-wide throughout the state on this very topic. And if we are trying to streamline within districts to get everyone on the same page, very clearly, at least in our perspective, the high school is nowhere near where the middle school is. And it's really showing in everything. Like Dana, you were just saying, trying to cram a real full freshman year into this pandemic year and assessing on that is really unrealistic, with not a lot of feedback and conversation. And I'm just surprised that that's what's happening. So I'm just throwing that out there for food for thought, how many districts are really having those conversations and what's coming out of them. Thank you for including me. I love showing up. Sorry I have to jump on a next call. And hi, Life. It's so good to see you. Never get to see Life, even though he's my neighbor, but it's really nice to see your face.
Saw some people run by out my window. I was like, they probably just ran past Sarah.
They totally did. I was just watching them.
Thank you very much, Sarah. If we don't see you, have a great holiday break.
Yeah, oh, I'll see you, but I won't see everyone else. Have a lovely holiday, everyone. Bye.
Bye now. Take care. Life, what do you think?
I mean, I just love, I'm here to learn. I love hearing from you folks. You're amazing. I think what Sarah was just saying about high school versus middle school, it just brings me back to that blog post I wrote on assessment reporting when, talking to curriculum directors or teachers or superintendents, it came back to like families, like what we're being asked to do by families. And ultimately, high school, we need to have this ready in place for college. Like whatever system changes we think we're going to make. And I heard this years ago when I was working with high school students trying to have community conversations around personalized learning. These kids were so enlightened. They were so ready for all the changes in school, but they were juniors and seniors, and they would say, but don't do this now because I'm applying to colleges right now. Don't mess me up, but totally, we should do all this stuff. We got to do all this stuff. And so I'm just like, we're so beholden to that. And I was like, what are we beholden to? This idea that at some point we have to compete to be able to go pay tens of thousands of dollars to continue our education, to get a credential, to have any chance of life. It's a really messed up system. And I'm just like, whatever we do in K-12, something has to change bigger, it seems. But, then I think about middle school and I'm like, can't we like make changes at middle school? Like, can't we just let some of this stuff go? And I think it's like, it's not, so people say like, well, we have to prepare them for high school because then they have to get into college. But I think it's more than that. I think we do crave, like even now you hear people's language like, I can't wait till it gets back to normal, right? And if you get a chance to step back and think about it, normal wasn't working, like particularly for students from historically marginalized communities. Like it was not working. It was really actually quite painful and harmful. So we want better than normal, right? But there's like this underlying grammar of schooling, they called it in the last AOE report about this, that just like, what is school? And I think even in times of stress, especially, it's like, I want to get back to school, right? Those kids you're talking about, Dawn, they're like, ooh, nice scores. Okay, cool. I know how to do this. I'm getting my report card. It's report card time. This is a thing. So I think like what I've seen, just one observation is that most districts, they still have scores, certainly when it comes to content stuff. And often like the PLP is a place where some of these other areas can really thrive, like transferable skills. I know several districts who they still have kind of more report cards going on, but like transferable skills, oh yeah, we want to do that too. That's great for the PLP. And I just think that's a kind of double-edged sword, because it's true. You can like kind of have a proof there that like there's other ways to think about measuring things or to think about giving feedback or a more holistic way to approach things. But ultimately, like reporting does matter because that is seen by many as like where things get legitimate, right? And so you have families coming and be like, oh, student-led conferences. And even if they come to them, they're kind of like, oh, well, that's cute. Like they're really talking about their stuff. My kid's awesome. But then they're like, report cards come next week. I'm ready to get that piece of paper out and see how it really plays out. So I think the idea of an ongoing conversation, I think you said it, Maura, like, I just love that idea. And if we could get to a place where it really was a process of ongoing self-assessment by students in conversation with their teacher, or Meg, you were saying that your students were saying, it's like having a conversation with you, right? So like, you're always having that conversation. And then a couple times in the year, you like bring the families in really solidly into that conversation and be like, here's, student, how are you self-assessing these days? Cool. Teacher, yeah, I totally agree. Or yeah, but a couple other things I want to add. And we get that cycle going through more of a narrative based than scores. Love to see us to get there eventually. So many of you are doing so many aspects of it, and I wish the systems would catch.
Thank you, Leif. Joe, what's your perspective on all this assessment and reporting?
I'm part of a very traditional school district that gives A, B, C's, and D's, and does it 4 times a year. And I don't have control over that. And so I don't worry about it that much. What we're doing on the team I'm with, the remote team, is we told parents straight up that we were doing transferable skills for the year. And we told them that, well, what I'm focusing on is reading, writing, speaking, listening, and the inquiry process. And those are the conversations that I have with the students when we talk about the work that we're going to do together, is which of these things are we doing and what are our goals in trying to do them. And then we just have a feedback loop that way. I read a lot of chat. My fingers hurt a little bit. I think I'm getting a little arthritis from the amount of typing that goes on with that sort of thing. Assessment, we still have A's, B's, C's, and D's, and they still go out in the mail. But I think that system doesn't really allow for a feedback loop with the parent that has any value to it. But I think if the relationship that you have with your students is one of give and take, the time that you have with them, they have an understanding of what's going on. And I don't have a problem with saying that I'm trying to get kids ready for high school. If high school means reading, writing, speaking, listening, in the inquiry process. One that we've added lately is knowing what's right and wrong. Just a basic conversation about especially around current events. What's right and what's wrong. Let's talk about it. So those are the things that we're assessing here, and they end up with a letter grade. And we have a lot of systems to try to support those who are struggling with the things we're asking them to do. And today we have 3 building principals we answer to on our team. And we met with those 3 building principals, and the conversation was around letter grades and what are you as administrators going to hold kids to in relation to these grades. And our district has said that basically this year doesn't count as far as grades go. We're reporting these things out, but nobody is going to be held accountable for the situation that we're in this year, meaning the students. And so everybody is moving on. And so this assessment feedback loop that we've created, it's worth as much as the relationship that you have with the student you're working with, because the other things this time with the pandemic don't really have any value to them.
I appreciate your comments as always, Joe. Very thoughtful and reflective. And I think, as you heard from our participants, there's so much going on, and there's so many different takes on it. And I guess we're at about 7 minutes past 4. And again, I just appreciate everybody's comment. I guess what I'd like is to just kind of go around and have people give just a quick sentence or two about something that you've either heard or that you're reflecting on because of the conversation, or that stood out to you. And I'll kind of try and start as an example. This idea of self-assessment and reflection has become a really important part of my practice, especially around the setting of goals. And so I continue to think about that as a skill that kids need, and to do independently, but and having that consistent cycle of student feedback to me about how things are going, and not just academically, but also mentally, or the social emotional learning. I'm starting to ask kids questions on assessments. Would you like to be visited by a counselor, et cetera, things like that. So this idea of self-assessment and reflection and continuing to build those skills with kids. But the last thing I'll say is, when we talk about expedition, we talk about things like focus and self-discipline and staying motivated and staying engaged and treating each other. We're all in this together. We're in the pod and we're on a journey. And the better we get along now, the better it's going to be when things get tough. And so we're kind of using that model. We're in this together, and let's have at it. And that's when those transferable skills really come into play. And so we have conversations about that. And to me, as Joe mentioned, those relationships and that self-reflection and self-assessment and asking kids to tell me how I'm doing, that's really what's becoming a big part of my practice. So if folks could just kind of bring us to the finish line with a thought or so about what they've heard and what they're going to be thinking about going forward, that would be great. And Maura?
Thanks. So many things are swirling in my head, but 2 quick takeaways. One is that it's really about that process of learning and the relationship with students and providing them that feedback and the ongoing conversation about how they're doing. And then the second one, which I have been thinking about for so long, that Life brought up again, is, until it changes, or, from the top down, and even thinking about higher ed and some of those, traditional pieces, the big changes, how do we get those big changes to happen? And so those would be my 2 takeaways.
Awesome. Thank you. Kevin?
Yeah, and this definitely piggybacks on what both of you were saying. Just 2 things that really come up in my mind is this idea of self-assessment, like you were talking about, Don, and these ongoing conversations. And just to go off of what Maura said, like how, I feel like we've been talking about these things, for how many years since we've started these webinars. Like what has to happen other than a pandemic to start making some change here, and having those people in charge of making this change see the value of these conversations and figure out what we can do differently. So it's good to see. I feel like we've got these little ground fires starting in Willis or in Vermont, in all these different towns and all districts, but let's keep it spreading. It's awesome to hear.
Thank you. Meg?
Yeah, I applaud you guys for having the capacity to think beyond like what's right in front of me, because I don't seem to have that these days. But so what's right in front of me right now is I'm thinking about I'm really just mindful of reaching out to the kids that I know are somehow more vulnerable to what I'm about to put out on jump rope. And I'm just holding space for them and trying to figure out how I'm going to navigate that. And the other one is January. Like I guess January felt so far away, and just this idea of joy in January. So I think I need to just be thinking about what I'm going to be doing to make it joyful.
Awesome. Dana?
I've felt for a long time that assessing students on a predetermined linear trajectory really isn't a good match for the diversity of human experience or variability in what people value and the skills that they've invested in. But that has become so incredibly crystal clear with the pandemic and the financial impacts and the mental health impacts in a way that I feel kind of dumb for not recognizing it before, or at least not so clearly. But the idea of saying, well, we expect to be here and you're not, and here's a number that says you're not there, just seems so dehumanizing, instead of reporting on what a kid has engaged in and what they have accomplished. At the same time, I recognize that there are timelines and doors that close because we have a systemically inequitable education and financial socioeconomic system. So it's a hard thing to resolve, and it's just painful to have to be so close to watching it and thinking about how that plays out down the road. So I'm hopeful that I kind of keep this and really focus on the individuals, and to carry that into advocacy more than just personal belief and action.
Thank you very much. Life?
Dana, I really appreciate that. And it's not lost upon me that you're a math teacher, and I think like knowing that whole like linear progression thing is so big in math, like the building blocks, and you know the stuff where you don't. And it's also true that math is like huge gatekeeper for those future prospects, and I just think that ethos of our society, that part of things, it's again about competition, right? Who can run that race faster, who can get down that little linear progression more quickly, is just so damaging. And so, what I appreciate is that, there's people like y'all out there day in, day out working with kids, like Dawn said, we're all in this together. Like that's the cure. That's the alternative here, collectivism. Like, how can we do things together? So I wish that there wasn't like this artificial scarcity going on. And I wish that you all had all the resources you needed, including time, to just do everything. You could give every one of these kids everything they needed if you had the right amount of time. I believe that, because you're that amazing. But in the moment, I think the best we can do is try to serve kids, try to know them, and help them analyze these systems too. So those realizations that Dana's talking about, like Don't wait until they're 45 like me. Like, try to help them see it now. And knowing that somebody like Joe Rivers is like, okay, right and wrong, that's another thing that's part of our curriculum here. We're going to be talking about day in, day out. It's like, makes my heart full. So just appreciate y'all.
Thank you, Life. Joe?
So a few weeks ago, we were doing some research about 1950s down here in southeastern Vermont. And there was a big baby boom going on then, right? And so all the schools down here were having these big building pushes and consolidation, and all those little 1 and 2 schoolroom houses were being shut down. And so school was really transforming at a really high level. And during all of that, there's this little town up on the hill, a hill town called Dover. And the teacher who in this one-room schoolhouse was sending her kids to Brattleboro High School, her kids, all of them were making the honor roll. She'd been sending kids for like 15 years or something. And so somehow all those kids up in the hills milking cows and all that were coming into the town and being successful. So they asked her, what is it that you do that allows these kids to come into this new environment and be so successful? And she ended up winning some award, and that's why we know it, because we read the interview. And her response was patience and an understanding heart.
Man, Joe Rivers, I'll tell you what. Yeah, about it. There it is right there. That's why we love having you on, Joe Rivers. And actually, Joe, believe it or not, I have a closing that's in your honor. All right. And it won't be too painful, I promise. But I want to end. It's so good to see everybody. And as Meg said, like, it's right in front of me. And I'm sitting there telling the kids every day, we're going to make it to the break. And and this is a milestone. I'm like, we're halfway across the Arctic ice sheet. We're going to do this. You know, it's like super expedition and all that. But it's so good to see everybody and just kind of and I want to end on a positive note. And I have 2 questions. And the first one is, what are you looking forward to over the break? One thing you're looking forward to. And then the second one, I've been listening to a lot of music lately because, you know, I think things are stressful. And so I'm going home and I'm listening to music like loud. And if I forget to turn it down, I get in the car in the early morning, it like wakes up the neighborhood. I got to turn off the music. But I know that Joe is a huge music fan. So 2 things I'm going to ask you before we close out is, what are you looking forward to over the break? And then what's one song that you have either on your playlist or you have maybe on your phonograph or in your CD? What's one song that you've been listening to? And I'm just going to say that I'm really looking forward to being at home and reading and just kind of getting in relaxed mode. And the song that I've been listening to is I Shall Be Released by the band. That's one that's on the top of my playlist. And thank you all again for being here. And we'll go to Maura and write down the list.
I am looking forward to having some unscheduled time with my family, and the music that's playing currently, it's either some sort of a holiday soundtrack or Run Baby Run by Casper Baby Pants, which is a fan favorite for the 3-month-old twins in my house. So our music taste has changed very drastically.
I guess. Thank you, Maura. Kevin?
I'm definitely looking forward to some downtime and, not looking at a screen for a very long time is going to be great. Gosh, songs, that's tough. Typically my wife is belting musicals and show tunes all the time, and she's very talented. And I would do a shout out to, if you haven't had a chance to watch any lyric performances, they're online. You should stream them. They got a great holiday special coming up. And then the big one, Songs for New World, Up New World, is on too. So that's always in my mind is her singing. So that's it.
Awesome. Meg?
So looking forward to just some downtime to not think about what's happening tomorrow necessarily, and just being right there in the moment with the boys outside as much as we can. Oh my gosh. So Mark just got these, like this box of albums from some guy in Reading, Vermont. And I think, so one came up, it sparked this other digging in through the albums, and The Cure. I feel like I need to go back to my 80s, like The Cure. And then we were listening to Dave Brubeck the other night, and I was like, oh, this is so lovely. So Brubeck and The Cure, I guess.
Awesome. Dana?
I am also listening to music very loud on the way home, and depending on the mood, also cranking the bass up to really get it out. I have what I call my everyday playlist. It's everything that Kristen and I have collected since 1990. And it's just on a random mix. And if I'm not in the mood for what comes up, I skip it. And if a couple come along, I look ahead. But I'm just enjoying them as they come. Break, I'm really looking forward to the downtime, staying up late with the boys, sleeping in a little bit late, just around the house with the family and the animals and stuff.
Sounds good. Life?
Recovery.
Break, I'm looking forward to playing in the snow. Like, there's finally a little bit of snow here, and we haven't done much playing in the snow, but it's been a long time coming. And just like people have been saying, unplugging, we get off social media for a while. I've had a couple hiatuses lately, and they were nice. So a little of that. And song wise, we just made our holiday mix. But I think Make Your Way Back by Beyonce is a family fave. She's like one of the few artists that we all just absolutely love. And the song is about trust in youth. So fitting for this group.
Nice. Thank you. And thank you so much for joining us. It's really a pleasure to see you again and hear your perspective. Joe.
I'm looking forward to getting off the wheel for a while, just being able to not follow the routine that's been created by this remote stuff, and to follow more natural life patterns. That would be nice. Music, I've gone the other way. I'm trying to listen to quiet stuff. The loud stuff is too much for me these days. So Victoria Williams, This Moment, if you should try to look for that one. She's a great songwriter, and it's an acquired voice, but it's a great song, no matter what she writes.
Is she sisters to Lucinda? No.
Well, just in closing, I just have so much respect for this group and the hard work that you're doing, and really look forward to this meeting, especially this year. And it's just great to hear everybody. And I hope you have an awesome holiday break, winter break, and I hope you get some time to spend with your family and do all the things that you really enjoy doing. And on behalf of the kids of Vermont, thank you so much. Before we do go, I just want to remind folks there is the Middle Grades Conference happening on January 23rd. It'd be great to see everybody there again as well. And thanks also for the Middle Grades Collaborative for supporting us in this work, and the Tarrant Institute for Innovative Education. But sincerely, I hope everybody just has a wonderful break, and we head into the new year with a new year, actually. It'd be nice. 2020 out the window. So everybody have a wonderful break, and thanks again for all your contributions, and we'll talk to you soon. Okay. Thanks everybody. Take care.
Thank you, Don. Take care.
Thanks a lot, Don.
Bye.
Appreciate it. Thank you, everybody.
Bye. Good to see y'all.